Indeed dashboard. Learn more by visiting Indeed.com/credit.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers will not have LeBron James tonight for their LA showdown against the Clippers. LeBron has a sore right ankle. This will be the fifth game this season LeBron has missed because of an injury. The Lakers are 2-2 in LeBron's absence. 7 p.m. tip-off tonight at Crypto.com on TNT. Coco Gauff advanced to the Australian Open semifinals for the first time in her career. The 19-year-old sister defeated Marta Kostyuk of Ukraine in 3 sets. Gauff is ranked 4th in the world. Remember Hugh Jackson? He was head coach of the Cleveland Browns from 2016 to 2018 and the Oakland Raiders for 1 year in 2011. Jackson is in final talks with Morehouse College in Atlanta to become their next head football coach. The famous HBCU hasn't had a winning season in 6 years. Jackson is available. He was fired at Grambling after going 8-14 in 2 seasons. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough. 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 If we care enough.
Oh, na, 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 na. Oh, na, 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 na. Oh, na, 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 na. Good vibration, yeah. That's the positive vibes and we creating, yeah. The sounds that make you feel right, we keep it blazing, yeah. Forever shining this light, we keep it blazing, yeah.
I'm Tavis Smiley, and we are pleased to have you hanging out with us today on our program as we commence hour 2 here in just a moment. In case you have not heard yet, the Oscar nominations were announced this morning, and we will not have Oscars so white this time around. As a matter of fact, I'm seeing stories everywhere now. Hollywood is bragging on itself. This year, there is Oscar diversity. People of color are nominated in every single acting category. Not a single acting category this year without some color in it, without some diversity in it, and all kinds of folk are making history, including Coleman Domingo, Jodie Foster, and others. So here's the rundown of the African-American nominees that you might be interested to hear about. Sterling K. Brown, nominated for American Fiction. You've not seen that film. It's an amazing, amazing project. Sterling K. Brown, nominated for American Fiction in the Best Supporting Actor category. Danielle Brooks, nominated in the Supporting Actress category for The Color Purple. Jeffrey Wright and Coleman Domingo, both nominated for Best Actor nominations. Jeffrey Wright for the aforementioned American Fiction film, alongside his partner Sterling K. Brown. That's amazing because the first time in a long time that there were 2 black actors in the same film nominated for actor and supporting actor. So Jeffrey Wright Best Actor for American Fiction, Sterling K. Brown. Supporting Actor for American Fiction. And then there's Coleman Domingo, nominated for Best Actor for his role as Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin is finally getting his love, finally getting his respect. So Coleman Domingo nominated for Best Actor for his role as Bayard Rustin. As far as films, American Fiction is nominated for Best Picture. That's a big deal. But they did not nominate the black director of American Fiction, but they did nominate his adapted screenplay. So just a quick rundown on some of the nominees for the Academy Awards. Of course, their nominations are being talked about everywhere now, so you can Google it and get all the list of everybody. But those are the ones I wanted to bring to your attention right quick, so we will not have an Oscars So White protest this year, given that in every acting category there is some diversity, including the first Native American woman ever nominated for a Best Actor nomination. But nominated for a Best Actor award, I should say, for Martin Scorsese's film Killers of the Flower Moon. So it's a bit more diverse this year than in years past, and I think that's good news. That said, I am pleased now to commence this second hour that I've been delighted and waiting on getting into. Our guest is renowned author Adam Schatz, and I'm anxious to delve into the complex life and ideas of Frantz Fanon, courtesy of Adam Schatz's latest book, which offers some profound insights into the legacy of this influential black thinker who yet inspires today's movements for social and racial justice. Adam Schatz calls him an intellectual hero, an intellectual celebrity, I should say. An intellectual celebrity. We'll unpack that. Adam Schatz, good to have you on this program. Congrats on the book, sir. How are you today?
I'm well, and thanks for having me.
It's my great delight. I've been looking for this dialogue. I was joking with a friend of mine a day or two ago. There are a couple of names that you should go to when giving a speech if you want to sound really, really smart. And one of those names that you can go to, if you want to sound smart, just quote Frantz Fanon. And everybody, of course, goes to the Wretched of the Earth. I mean, everybody goes there, right? The Wretched of the Earth. But if you can weave Frantz Fanon into your presentation, you will impress the audience. You will sound really, really smart. And I say that jokingly, but that's also in part true. Which leads me to ask, how did Frantz Fanon become such an intellectual celebrity, as you call him?
I mean, it is kind of an incredible story. I mean, he's a guy who was born in Martinique in 1925, fights with the Free French forces against fascism during the Second World War, ends up in France studying psychiatry, and then in 1953 he goes to Algeria, and a year later he joins the Algerian rebellion against French rule and becomes this really influential figure, a spokesman for the Algerian national liberation movement. He was relatively well known among radical circles when he was alive. And remember, he died when he was 36 years old in Bethesda, Maryland. Yep. But it was after his death that he became a celebrity. And the crazy thing about this story, too, is that he was basically resurrected by Black Americans.
We'll talk about his celebrity after death and being resurrected by African Americans. Let me tell you where I want to start, though. We've already started. Let me tell you where I want to go next. I'm looking at my clock here. If I ask you this question now, it won't be fair, Adam, because I have to cut you off, and I don't want to do that. Let me frame where I want to go, and when we come forward, we'll let you sink your teeth into this. So I want to go to his childhood. I want to get a better understanding of the backstory. It seems to me that we can jump to his being 36 and dying too soon. We can talk about how he became a celebrity after his death, and how Black folk were involved in that renaissance, that resurrection of his work and witness, if you will. But I want to understand who he was growing up. And get a better understanding of the backstory to Frantz Fanon. Adam Schatz's book is called The Rebel's Clinic, a new biography of the psychiatrist and revolutionary Frantz Fanon, which aims to restore complexity to a man both revered and reviled for his militancy. We will get into that. His being revered and being reviled. A lot to talk about in this hour. You're going to learn a lot about Frantz Fanon if you stick around to Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
There's only a few days left for open enrollment, starting at $0 a month. LA Care Covered offers the benefits you need to achieve your health goals. $0 preventive services, 24/7 virtual care and nurse advice lines, walk-in minute clinics, free fitness and nutrition classes, and more. Become a member of LA's most affordable health plan. Get a free instant quote at lacarecovered.org. Have open enrollment questions? Connect with us today at 855-222-4239. Find your affordable path to wellness with LA Care Covered today.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, as the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black history. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
He's rooting for everybody Black. Everybody Black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
I was joking with our guest in this hour, Adam Schatz, author of the new book, The Rebels Clinic, The Revolutionary Lives of Frantz Fanon. We'll unpack that title in just a second. I got a question about that. But I was joking with Adam a moment ago that if you want to sound smart when you give a speech, just quote Frantz Fanon. Everybody goes to the wretched of the earth. If you quote Fanon, you're going to sound really smart in your presentation. And speaking of smart, I have a really, really smart audience, Adam, and it doesn't take long for people to correct me when I make a mistake. It turns out that I overlooked an African-American nominated for one of the major awards. I ran that list, and somehow I did not mention Divine Joy Randolph, who is a Black actress in The Holdovers opposite Paul Giamatti. I love Paul Giamatti. But Divine Joy Randolph is a Black actress in The Holdovers, and she is also nominated for a Supporting Actor Award. So there's another sister who I did not intend to slight by not mentioning her name in the list of those persons who've been nominated for Academy Awards. I won't repeat the list again right now. I'll do it again at the top of the last hour in case you missed it. But Divine Joy Randolph, we want to add her name to that list of these great actors, these great thespians who were nominated for Academy Awards this year. And so there you have it. Sorry, Ms. Randolph, that I overlooked you in my list of Black nominees this time around. That said, back to Adam Schatz. So Adam, I said a moment ago that I want to sort of back this thing up a bit and understand more about the upbringing of Frantz Fanon. Before I do that, though, the book is called, as I said, The Rebels Clinic, The Revolutionary Lives, plural, of Frantz Fanon. Obviously, you meant something by that title, The Revolutionary Lives, plural, of Frantz Fanon.
Sure, and I mean something by the Rebels Clinic, and the point basically is that Fanon's thinking about racism, mental health, domination, resistance, liberation, it all takes shape in his work with patients. This man is a psychiatrist, and you can't read him without remembering that. And as far as lives goes, Fanon is involved in several revolutions. He's involved in the resistance to fascism. He's involved in a psychiatric revolution in France, which he then imports to Algeria. He takes part in the Algerian War of Liberation, and he becomes quite active in African independence struggles as the traveling ambassador of the FLN stationed in Accra. So I just wanted to underline the plurality of Fanon's existence.
Yeah. It occurred to me going through your text, preparing for this conversation, and I've been reading, Fanon, and obviously been exposed to him for years. But something hit me the other day, and I kind of felt stupid, Adam, frankly, when it hit me, because I hadn't actually processed this before. That one of our great intellectuals, this intellectual celebrity, as you call it, there's Du Bois. No, you can't have a list of brilliant black intellectuals without Du Bois on the list, the first African American to get a PhD from Harvard. So you have to have Du Bois on the list. But when you think about Fanon, it occurred to me just a couple of days ago that this noted intellectual celebrity that you write about was in fact a psychiatrist. And when you think of all the ways in which inside the black community there are still these issues with mental health. People are still skittish about talking about it. It's a third rail still in many respects. But one of our most noted intellectuals was a psychiatrist who, to your point, came to his views in part born of his interactions with his patients. Does that make sense? I mean, for me, it's an interesting irony. Does it make sense to you?
It makes sense to me completely. And, he's not alone. I mean, he had peers in the United States, like Richard Wright, who helped to found the Lafargue Clinic, which was a mental health clinic in Harlem in the 1940s. And, Fanon was not aware that he'd established that clinic, but he knew Richard Wright's work, and he quoted it extensively.
Yeah. Just amazing. Again, I put a final point on it and move forward. You have these great intellectuals in black history, like Richard Wright and Frantz Fanon, and we don't often enough times remind ourselves of their connection to mental health. It's not something we ought to be ashamed of, afraid of, addressing or talking about or acknowledging. If it's good enough for Fanon, it's good enough for Richard Wright, it's good enough for Tavis Smiley and you. I digress as we move forward. All right, Adam Schatz, take me back to Frantz Fanon's upbringing. I understand the backstory of this guy.
Sure. Fanon is born in 1925 in the capital of Martinique, Port-au-Prince, and he's raised in a middle-class family that could afford servants and piano lessons. It wasn't wealthy, but it was certainly comfortable. And he grew up thinking of himself as French. The first three words that Fanon learned to write were "Je suis français," I am French. He was taught that his ancestors were the Gauls. Now, his ancestors were not the Gauls. His ancestors were from Africa. So he's growing up kind of being internally colonized by this French ideology that is treating all of these people in Martinique as if they're basically white people with black skins. And but then he starts to experience this disillusionment with that idea when he joins the French army. And he finds out that it's a colonial army. He finds out that there's a hierarchy, that he's treated as an honorary European because he's West Indian, but the Africans and the Arabs are treated very differently. And then after the war, he's in France, and he's helped to liberate that country, and he can't get a white woman to dance with him. And then finally, he returns after the war to study psychiatry, and he has this shattering experience where he's on a train, and he sees this white boy with his mother, and the white boy says, "Look, maman, a Negro." And Fanon realizes, oh my God, in the eyes of this little boy, I'm an object of terror and fascination. He associates me with things like cannibalism and violence and so on. And it's shattering recognition for him because he'd always thought of himself as a French man of color and realizes, no, in their eyes, I'm a black man and I'm subject to the same kind of racism that Africans are.
It's a story beautifully told, and yet I'm still stuck on the very beginning of the story. And this phrase, I knew this was going to happen. I got my pen in my hand for those who are watching me right now. You talk to Adam Schatz, you got to write fast, man, because this guy's dropping bars and using phrases that I just love. I love how he turns a phrase. I'm still stuck, Adam, on that phrase, internally colonized. I could give a speech on that, and I think I will somewhere down the road, because that is something that so many of us who are listening right now still wrestle with. So many of us. It's a beautiful phrase from Adam Schatz. I'm going to own it in about 3 months, but I love it. Internally colonized. I could just spend an hour or two talking about the struggle that so many of us have because we are internally colonized. Tell me more about how Fanon broke out of that internal colonization.
Well, he broke out of it ultimately as a soldier, as a doctor, and finally as a member of a national liberation army that was fighting French rule in Algeria, which was which was the jewel in the crown of the French Empire. In fact, Algeria was not even considered a colony. Mm-hmm. It had been, after being conquered, it had been turned into an administrative part of France, divided into 3 departments. So he challenged that internal colonization, as it were, by fighting it. But it went very deep with him. I mean, he writes in Black Skin, White Masks about essentially being taught to identify with whites. He would go to a film. Who would he identify with? Would he identify with Tarzan, or would he identify with the people in the jungle? He identified with Tarzan. You know, it was this insidious process by which he was taught to think of himself as no different from any other French person, when the reality was he would never be accepted as such.
Mm. I suspect the latter reality, that he would never be accepted as such, in part doesn't or precludes him from falling prey to that. What I'm getting at is there are all kind of black folk in this country and around the globe who find themselves in the same situation that Fanon was in, and they end up going to the dark side, as it were. But that's not where he ends up. And I'm fascinated by the ways in which he ends up being comfortable with the skin that he's in, if I can put it that way.
Well, it was a process. And although Fanon didn't really write a memoir, he talks about how difficult that ordeal was for him in Black Skin, White Mask, which was his first book, published in 1952 when he was 27, a book that, by the way, has many parallels with Du Bois's Souls of Black Folk. I mean, the idea of double consciousness is not in Fanon, but it's implicit. And what he talks about in that book is how, for a period of time, once he discovered that he was black, he began to embrace the French philosophy, the black consciousness philosophy of negritude, and started to think of himself as having unique poetic powers, of having a kind of mystical relationship to his identity. Eventually, he moves away from that, still very proud to be black, but no longer enchanted by nationalism. He moves more towards a kind of social justice ideology, which is actually not that different from what Du Bois ends up embracing in his latter years when he ends up in Ghana. There are some interesting parallels between the two figures.
Tell me more. I mean, now you got me titillated. Tell me about these parallels.
Well, I mean, in the sense that, Fanon, like Du Bois, is very interested in the psychic damage that racism inflicts on black people, and also the psychic damage that it inflicts on the oppressor. He's very much a person of the left. He also thinks about race in international terms. Du Bois, becomes very much an internationalist in the 30s and 40s, and that comes into full blossom by the time he dies. He is a persona non grata in the United States. He's in permanent exile. He's joined the Communist Party. And Fanon, too, is forced to leave France. He would have been arrested, if not executed, for his involvement in the Algerian national liberation struggle. He chooses to live instead in Tunisia and in Ghana. So there are some rather striking parallels. Yeah.
To your point, Du Bois eventually just gave up on America and went to Accra and spent his remaining days in Ghana. I've had the honor of being in that house where Du Bois lived. It's now the Du Bois Museum, as you know, built in the house and around the house. My first time there, remember like it was yesterday when you mentioned it, I just got goosebumps. I was a kid, and Maya Angelou took me to Ghana with her. And I literally, for 10, 12 days, just walked around carrying her bags. But it was such an honor as a kid to just hang out with Maya Angelou in Ghana. And she was there to give the annual Du Bois lecture at the Du Bois home and museum. And everybody came in to hear her. Miriam Makeba came in, and Hugh Masekela came, and Stokely Carmichael, who was then Kwame Ture, came, and John Henry Clark came from Harlem. Everybody came to, went back to Ghana to hear Maya give this major address. And it just hit me so hard as a young person sitting there taking all this in with all these people around me, that Du Bois just gave up on America, went to Ghana. Another factoid that I always find interesting. The announcement of Du Bois's death in Accra was made at the March on Washington. How's that for a moment? I mean, they're in the middle of the March on Washington. A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin, who I mentioned earlier, played by Coleman Domingo, now today nominated for an Academy Award for playing Bayard Rustin. These dots connect in fascinating ways. I love it. So the announcement is made at the March on Washington by A. Philip Randolph. That our great hero, our great leader, W.B. Du Bois, has passed away in Accra, Ghana. Just some interesting facts that I'm sharing because they're popping into my head. Tell me.
And 1 year after Du Bois's death, Fanon too dies in D.C.
Yeah.
And Fanon and Du Bois addressed the same conference of Black writers and artists in Paris in 1956. Both were very much a part of a kind of African and Pan-African internationalism.
I love these parallels. Tell me more about Fanon's social justice advocacy. That's a phrase now that we use all the time, social justice. But then, tell me a bit more, frame for me better, his social justice advocacy.
Well, Fanon's principal commitment was to the cause of overthrowing colonialism. Mm-hmm. He arrived in Algeria in late 1953 as the administrator of a psychiatric hospital. I mean, imagine that. He's 28 years old and he's running a hospital in Algeria. But he's there as a colonial administrator because France had this policy of sending accomplished West Indians to its other colonies, to parts of the Arab world, to Africa, to serve as these shining examples of how great France was. But Fanon already harbored anti-colonial convictions, and 11 months into his stay in Algeria, the rebellion breaks out. These young men, whom Fanon fiercely identifies with, take up arms and declare that Algeria belongs to the Algerians, to the Algerian Muslim majority, and not to the settlers who've occupied the country since 1830. And Fanon is electrified by this rebellion. He even offers to fight with them. But the Algerians decide that he's much more useful as a doctor. Mm-hmm. And he sets up a clandestine clinic. He treats wounded fighters. He becomes deeply involved in the rebellion, so much so that he's eventually forced to leave the country or else face the consequences. And Fanon's principal role in that struggle is as a spokesman and as someone who articulated the goals of the Algerian Revolution to people in other parts of the world, the European left, but also African independence leaders. And when he's in Tunisia, he becomes very close to people like Patrice Lumumba.
Mm-hmm. There's a name for you, Lumumba. This is getting good, as we say around here. When we come forward, so much more to talk to Adam Schatz about. His book is called The Rebels Clinic, The Revolutionary Lives of Frantz Fanon. This brilliant black intellectual who Adam Schatz calls, in fact, an intellectual celebrity. Everybody's quoting Fanon these days. When we come forward, a lot more to unpack here. I want to start, I think, with, and I could have done this 30 minutes ago, but why psychiatry? Why psychiatry for Frantz Fanon? I want to get into that. And as I said earlier, he has been and is both revered and reviled for his militancy. We'll talk about the revering part and the reviling part. It's a great conversation with Adam Schatz right now on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful they saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Former President Trump's defamation trial is expected to resume in New York City tomorrow after it was delayed for 2 days over COVID concerns. This trial is solely to determine how much money writer E. Jean Carroll will get, if any. She was awarded $5 million in a trial last May in which Trump was held liable for sexually abusing her back in the 90s and defaming her. Jury selection began Monday in New York City in the trial of 2 men accused of killing Run DMC's Jam Master Jay. It's taken prosecutors over 2 decades to reach this point, and now Roland Washington and Carl Jordan are standing trial charged with gunning down the legendary African-American DJ inside of his recording studio back in 2002. Both men have pleaded not guilty. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
New year, new hiring needs? Indeed's end-to-end solution helps you attract, interview, and hire candidates all year round. Schedule and conduct virtual interviews right from your Indeed dashboard. Learn more by visiting Indeed.com/credit.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers will not have LeBron James tonight for their LA showdown against the Clippers. LeBron has a sore right ankle. This will be the 5th game this season LeBron has missed because of an injury. The Lakers are 2-2 in LeBron's absence. 7 p.m. tip-off tonight at Crypto.com on TNT. Coco Gauff advanced to the Australian Open semifinals for the first time in her career. The 19-year-old sister defeated Marta Kostyuk of Ukraine in 3 sets. Gauff is ranked 4th in the world. Remember Hugh Jackson? He was head coach of the Cleveland Browns from 2016 to 2018 and the Oakland Raiders for 1 year in 2011. Jackson is in final talks with Morehouse College in Atlanta to become their next head football coach. The famous HBCU hasn't had a winning season in 6 years. Jackson is available. He was fired at Grambling after going 8-14 in 2 seasons. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, though.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Think It Up is an initiative to activate student-powered, teacher-led learning projects. Students and teachers, how can you spark great learning experiences in your classrooms today? Join at thinkitup.org.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of This Light of Ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement, a dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This Light of Ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This Light of Ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
You are indeed, and I'm thrilled about it. Our guest in this hour that I'm equally thrilled about is Adam Schatz. His book is called The Rebels Clinic, The Revolutionary Lives of Frantz Fanon. And so we are learning a great deal more than we've known heretofore about this brilliant black intellectual who Adam Schatz once again calls an intellectual celebrity. Indeed, everybody is quoting Fanon. We haven't gotten to the Wretched of the Earth yet. We'll get to that a little bit later in this conversation. But it occurs to me there are a couple of things I could have asked earlier, but the conversation just took off, and I'm following you through this hour. But let me just pause for a second, or pivot, or U-turn for that matter, and ask you, Adam Schatz, what I could have asked at the start of this conversation: why for you Fanon? I mean, I'm always fascinated about why and how people do what they do. Why Fanon for you as a subject?
Well, I chose Fanon for a few reasons. I mean, for one thing, I actually wrote about Fanon for the first time in about 2001. I reviewed the last major biography of Fanon, but it goes back to my childhood actually. My father had a library in the basement of sort of left wing literature, and he had original copies, the Grove editions of Black Skin, White Masks and The Wretched of the Earth, and along with the autobiography of Malcolm X and other books. And I was fascinated by the image of Fanon on the jacket of Black Skin, White Masks. He is this nattily dressed guy with this grave expression on his face, and his story just startled me. Here was this West Indian psychiatrist who'd gone to Algeria to support the rebels. What was the story there? And when I finally got around to reading Fanon when I was in college and I was in a French class, there's that story about the boy in the train resonated powerfully with me because although I'm not a black man, I'm a white guy, but I had a rather upsetting experience of anti-Semitism when I was a kid, when I was about 9 years old, and some kids were throwing change on the floor for me, and they had been friends of mine. And I was startled because I wasn't even I was not from a religious family. We weren't Zionists. And that experience of being fixed like a die that Fanon talks about, of beginning to look at yourself through the eyes of others, he was describing an experience that I had had. Different, not the same as the experience of racism, but an experience that I could understand. So I was sort of struck by just the power of his work. And another reason that I, was drawn to Fanon is that as a journalist, I ended up writing a lot about the Palestinian struggle for independence and spending a lot of time in Palestine, where Fanon is widely read among intellectuals. And I kept coming upon Fanon, and also in Algeria, because I spent a lot of time in Algeria as well. So all roads seemed to lead to Fanon, and he connected so many interests that I had, and that's why ultimately I decided to write a book about him. And I also felt that Fanon had been treated as a kind of poster icon. Fanon writes in Black Skin, White Masks that his greatest wish is to be seen as nothing but a man. But he's never seen that way. And I thought, well, no one's really done that for Fanon. There's something always a little bit either reverential or vilifying about the portraits of him. He doesn't seem like a man. I thought, well, that's a story that's yet to be told. I got 10 questions in my head. Let me go as fast as I can right quick based on what you just said. The first is, to what extent does has his iconography gotten in the way of us seeing about him what you want us to see? Does that make sense? Yeah, I think it has. I mean, because I think that, there are those who revere him as if he were a prophet rather than a brilliant but also flawed man who died when he was 36. And there are those who despise him, and they talk about Fanon as though he's responsible for more deaths than Henry Kissinger, who actually was responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths. I mean, I do think that the reason that so much of the commentary about Fanon fixates on violence is that he was a black man who supported armed resistance and self-defense. I think he's subject to the same kind of treatment that Malcolm X has been subject to.
Wow. Didn't see that coming. Wow. Let me process that for a second.
I mean, Fanon wrote about so many things,
Yeah.
and yet reading some of the reviews in my own book, even the positive ones, you'd think that the only thing that Fanon ever wrote about was killing the settler.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not naive in asking this, and you won't give me a naive response. Why do you think that is?
For the reason that I was just suggesting, that I think that there is a deep fear in the white unconscious of black violence. And I think so. I do think that even if it's not intentionally racist, I do think it arises out of racism.
Speaking of racism, you mentioned a moment ago that Fanon is widely read in Palestine. I think I get that, but tell me more about why they love reading about Fanon in Palestine.
Well, for a number of reasons. I mean, and this interest goes back many years. In the early 1960s, one of the leaders of the PLO, Abu Iyad, was reading him in Lebanon. And we don't know whether Yasser Arafat read Fanon, but Edward Said, the great Palestinian American intellectual, certainly did. Wrote extensively and quite brilliantly about Fanon. And in more recent years, he's become, I think, a very important figure for Palestinian psychiatrists who are studying things like the traumatic effects of war, the traumatic effects of torture. Fanon has been interesting to Palestinians for a number of reasons. I think, originally it was his emphasis on acquiring some kind of identity, acquiring a taste of power, of collective power, via armed struggle against one's oppressor. But I think that interest has developed in other directions, including, as I just mentioned, Fanon's very sensitive work on the effects of torture, humiliation, and other offenses to dignity, both body and mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also that that Fanon is seen as someone who was a voice of the third world, as it used to be called. Now, I guess we call it the Global South.
Yeah.
But Fanon is a great intellectual hero of that region.
Yeah. Why psychiatry for Fanon?
Yes, it's interesting. Fanon did not set out to become a psychiatrist, and in fact, when he was in medical school in Lyon in the mid-late 1940s, he originally thought he might become a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
He also had great literary aspirations. He wanted to be a poet or a playwright. He wrote 3 plays, 2 of which survive. But he was, in a sense, his literary interest led him to psychiatry. I mean, whom is he drawing upon in his writings on the black psyche in Black Skin, White Mask? It's Chester Himes and Richard Wright.
Mm-hmm.
It's literature.
Mm-hmm.
He's interested in what he calls the lived experience of racism. What is it like to inhabit a black body in a racist white majority society? Now, he has this experience as a doctor, just as an ordinary practitioner, that in my view leads him to psychiatry. He's visiting the homes of North African laborers in Lyon. These are Algerian men living far from their homes, sending money back to their wives. They're isolated, they're alone, they're poor, they're segregated, they're sleeping 7 to a room. And he goes to visit them, and they can't point to their physical ailment. They feel very sick, but they don't have an obvious lesion. And French doctors had said, it's just the North African syndrome, as in they're hallucinating, they're just offering an excuse not to work, they're lazy. And, Fanon reaches a very different conclusion. He writes this brilliant essay. It's one of the first essays he publishes in 1952 called The North African Syndrome. And his argument is that this idea of a North African syndrome is a product of a racist French psychiatry. What do these men suffer from? Why do they feel so ill? It's because racism has made them sick. And I think that's a key insight in Fanon's work, that racism itself is a kind of pathology, it's a kind of sickness, and colonialism as well. I mean, he's interested in the psychological effects of political oppression. And that's one of the reasons why groups like the Black Panthers in the late 60s take such a keen interest in Fanon. They start to apply Fanon in their mental health, in their public health clinics.
I say all the time, I leave the studio every day a lot smarter than when I came in. Today I'm going to leave a whole lot smarter than I came in, courtesy of this conversation with Adam Schatz. His book is called The Rebels Clinic, The Revolutionary Lives of Frantz Fanon. I've got more for him when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean. Of course I use Mr. Clean Magic Eraser to clean tough messes off my stovetop and bathtub. But then I discovered I can also use it to easily clean my patio furniture and even my shoes. I'm hooked.
And when wipes won't cut it, I use Magic Eraser Sheets. They're thin and flexible erasers, perfect for everyday messes, like gunk on my counters and sinks. They really are magical.
The reviews are in. Mr. Clean Magic Eraser and Sheets make cleaning look easy.
Can't sleep with this cold.
Honey.
Honey?
Honey, you need NyQuil Severe Honey.
NyQuil Severe Honey gives you powerful cold and flu symptom relief with a dreamy honey taste.
Feeling better, honey? Honey? I'll take that as a yes.
Try NyQuil Severe Honey for powerful cold and flu symptom relief. NyQuil Severe with honey flavor. The nighttime sniffling, sneezing, coughing, aching, fever. Honeylicious, best sleep with a cold. Medicine. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Skincare is self-care. And with daily beauty steals of 50% off during Ulta Beauty's Love Your Skin event, I can find everything I need to make loving my skin a daily practice. From brands like Osea, Lancome, and Tula. And I can shop weekly skin and wellness deals of 30% off more must-have brands. Plus, see what's new from brands like Bubble and in select stores, Sol de Janeiro and Ulla Henriksen. Hurry, event ends January 20th. Shop in store, online, or try pickup today. Ulta Beauty. The possibilities are beautiful. Conditions apply.
Thanks for calling Discover. This is Anjali.
Hi, it's Jennifer Coolidge. I just got an alert for a strange charge on my card.
No problem. We make sure you're never held responsible for unauthorized purchases on your Discover card. Let's see. Did you purchase something from a t-shirt cannon store yesterday?
Absolutely not. No, I already have like 3.
$0 fraud liability guarantee. It pays to Discover. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Limitations apply.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
I think the greatest compliment I can give Adam Schatz on this book, The Rebels Clinic, not that he needs it from me, but my greatest compliment is perhaps that he allows us to see and wrestle with Frantz Fanon's humanity. Not his iconography and not his intellectual celebrity status, but his humanity. And he does that brilliantly in this book called The Rebels Clinic, The Revolutionary Lives of Frantz Fanon. I'm still wrestling with and processing and thinking about your story of the boy on the train. And I guess my question is, what do we take away from Fanon about how do I want to phrase this? What do we take away from Fanon about how we process our way through those moments when we come to terms or are forced to come to terms with the way others see us? Does that make sense?
It does. And, that's a very tough question. I don't think that Fanon provides anything like a guide to how an individual caught in such a situation should respond at that moment in time. I think, I think that the story of Fanon in Algeria might give you a sense of where Fanon's thinking lay on these issues.
Sure.
He had been in Algeria for 3 years, and in 1956, he writes a letter to the resident minister, the governor general, the French official who presided over the governance of Algeria, and he said that I can no longer practice here. I can no longer do my work because I'm living in a kind of racial colonial madness, essentially. The only way in which these psychological complexes, these attitudes can be overcome is if there is a radical social transformation. There has to be an end to French rule. And I think that, generally speaking, that's where Fanon's thinking lies. He believes that there are not individual psychological solutions to large-scale political and social problems. That little boy on the train had been raised as a kind of racial expert by his own society. I mean, he may be an individual, but he reflects something much deeper and something much larger. I mean, called structural racism, called white supremacy. I mean, we have a lot of different ways of describing it. But collective problems require collective solutions. I think that's what Fanon's belief was.
One great intellectual, Fanon, calls it a radical social transformation. Another great intellectual named Martin Luther King Jr. called it a radical revolution of values. Whether you call it a radical social transformation or a radical revolution of values, you end up at the same place. Our remaining moments with Adam Schatz when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chuchas Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
My ride smells just right, just right, just right, just right.
Y'all gotta try that Febreze car.
Just right, just right, just right, just right. La 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 la. With up to 40 days of distancing. On low Febreze car clips right on your vent. You know my car's my happy place. Keep that smile on my face. When it smells just right, just right, just right. Yeah, breathe happy Febreze. La 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 la.
Made fresh daily in the Mert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
I wish I had more time, Adam Schatz. There's some stuff I really wanted to get to in this hour. We've covered a lot of ground, and that's why the book is there for people to read. It's called The Rebels Clinic, The Revolutionary Lives of Frantz Fanon. I didn't get time to get to this duality of Fanon believing in violence on the one hand, while also practicing a commitment to healing on the other hand as a psychiatrist. And I've seen the difficulty that some of your reviewers have had wrestling with his belief that violence is in fact a cleansing force. I know you have a different kind of spin on that term or that phrase, cleansing force, but maybe some other time we'll get to all that. Let me. I got 3 or 4 minutes left here. That's what I didn't get to. That's what I didn't get to in this hour. Let me just ask you 2 or 3 things right quick in these 4 minutes. Why do you think all these years later we are so fascinated still by Frantz Fanon?
I think we're fascinated by Frantz Fanon because he was an extraordinarily visionary analyst of the modern soul and philosopher of freedom. I mean, in that regard, I think he did have something in common with figures like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the fixation on violence leads us away from his incredibly deep perceptions into the experience of racism and to what it's like for people to inhabit coercive and confined settings. Yeah. Fanon is writing about a world that has crumbled. We don't live any longer in the world of colonial European empires, but that world has cast a vast shadow over our own world. We live in a world of enormous economic inequalities. There's a vast divide between the rich and the poor world. Read about the treatment of refugees. I mean, refugees arguably are today's wretched of the earth. Yeah. Fanon was someone who was acutely aware of the issue of human dignity. And that's what connects him to these great black thinkers like Du Bois, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King.
Yep. Let me ask you right quick, 2 minutes to go here. Why, I think I get it, why is it that it certainly appears to me that the book that most of us tend to quote or reference when we quote Fanon is The Wretched of the Earth? What is it about that text that that is the go-to for everybody, essentially?
Well, it's the go-to book because it was written as a manifesto. It was written to inspire anti-colonial revolutionaries throughout the underdeveloped world to take up arms against their oppressors. But I think that what some people people overlook a couple of very important things. For one thing, Fanon is very concerned with obviously dismantling the colonial system, but he's just as concerned about putting something better in its place. Mm-hmm. And he writes presciently about the oppressive systems set up by what he calls the national bourgeoisie. He saw far in advance the kind of corrupt autocratic regimes that would emerge in parts of Africa and the Arab world. Yeah. He was incredibly prescient. He also, I think, and this is another thing that is extraordinary, Fanon warned that no revolution can be driven by hatred, revenge, and racism. Mm. That ultimately a revolution had to be a revolution in values. Again, I think that connects him to King.
It does indeed.
He said that people do not join a revolution, he wrote, so that hatred can triumph after its victory. Mm. Those are words that are not often quoted.
Nope. Powerful prose. He's dead at the age of 36 in Bethesda, Maryland, but the life lived prior to that time is worth digging into, and you can do so by reading the book, The Rebels Clinic, The Revolutionary Lives of Frantz Fanon. We've just really scratched the surface here of this brilliant intellectual. Adam Schatz, what a great piece of work, man, and I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. Thank you for your time. All the best to you, sir.
So have I. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. George Fraser, when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Former President Trump's defamation trial is expected to resume in New York City tomorrow after it was delayed for 2 days over COVID concerns. This trial is solely to determine how much money writer E. Jean Carroll will get, if any. She was awarded $5 million in a trial last May in which Trump was held liable for sexually abusing her back in the 90s and defaming her. Jury selection began Monday in New York City in the trial of 2 men accused of killing Run DMC's Jam Master Jay. It's taken prosecutors over 2 decades to reach this point, and now Roland Washington and Carl Jordan are standing trial charged with gunning down the legendary African-American DJ inside of his recording studio back in 2002. Both men have pleaded not guilty. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
New year, new hiring needs? Indeed.com/credit.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.